morning. I'm Kathy Emmerich. I'm the Director of Pre-K and Elementary Success. I'm joined tonight by Kim Nelson. Do you want to introduce yourself, Kimberly?
Hi, I'm Kim Nelson. I think I know a lot of you, and I'm the principal of Valley View.
So tonight we are just going to follow up with information that was shared earlier in the webinar. We have kind of broken down the information to a scope of preschool. If you are in preschool area, you're in the right space. We don't have all the answers, and we might not even have all the questions. Our goal tonight is to share with you what we do think we know, and then elicit feedback from you to help us continue to develop this model and make sure that we do right by our students, our families, and our teachers. So as we're presenting information, please go ahead and put things in the chat as they come up, questions or thoughts. We will collect that chat and make sure that it gets into our FAQs and gets answered in the next day or so, and however our system is developing an FAQ location for that. At the end, there will be an exit ticket that you will be able to participate in, and in that exit ticket, you will be able to share other concerns or questions that you have as well. Kim, anything else that you would want to share before we get started? Okay, great.
No, just to reiterate that this is just our best thinking at this time, which you said. So.
Okay, so welcome to January 12th. So as we look at the instructional model through the lens of a preschool, we use the same graphics here to just kind of identify what our preschool students' day in life would look like. So cohort A would be either an AM or a PM session on a Monday or Tuesday, Tuesday, Wednesday off, and then on Thursday, Friday would be their asynchronous day. If you're a cohort B student, you would either have an AM, PM session in which Monday, Tuesday would be your asynchronous day, Wednesday would be also asynchronous, and then Thursday, Friday would be your day in the classroom. Right now, similar to the gen ed, we're not looking at recess or lunch opportunities, although preschool didn't have lunch anyway, so that's not a new thing for us. Wednesdays would stay similar to the way that they are now, so that teachers would still have time for planning, meetings, family connections, the things that you're typically doing now. Again, if you have questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat box. Kim's going to be monitoring that for us as well. And we can try and answer some here, but we'll also save those as well. So as we think about the instructional model, some of you may have seen this slide before. This really just articulates what a day would look like for a student. So a student would start their day at home. Let's say that they're cohort A and they get to come to school on Monday, Tuesday. So on a Monday, they would wake up, the family would complete the attestation. They would travel to school, arrive at school, have a great day of learning with their teachers and their colleagues. And then they would depart school and head home. Their asynchronous time would be the other 2 days of the week. So in this case, students came to school on Monday, Tuesday. They would be asynchronous working on Thursday, Friday. Also, same for cohort B. I apologize, that slide should have said B instead of A. So a teacher's day would look similar in that you would complete your attestation. You would arrive at your school work site. You'd be able to be with your students for the 2 hours and 15 minutes of instructional time. You would have planning time, lunch, and then of course your family connection time, which is part of the WAC time. You'd also have some increased family wrap up and connection time. And then you would have your PM session followed by the end of the daytime and then leave at the end of your day. So what we know right now is that students would be coming to school for 2 hours and 15 minutes, 2 times a week. They'd have 2 hours and 15 minutes, 2 days a week of asynchronous time. We're still working on what does good instructional practice look like for students who are in a classroom for 2 hours and 15 minutes, knowing that we have to keep social distancing at the forefront. while we're still trying to make sure that we're engaging kids in fun and meaningful ways. So we're still working on those plans and instructional components. We're also ordering materials so that students have their own materials and that they're not sharing. And building principals and leaders will be working with us to figure out organizational systems for that as well. We know that during this time of distance learning, teachers have really learned what's worked for their students for asynchronous. And so we're going to lean on teachers and their expertise as we're helping to develop plans for continuing to asynchronous teach our students 2 days a week. What we are creating right now for that in-person instructional component is that scope and sequence of what does learning look like for the rest of the year as we move into in-person learning. We know that these students haven't necessarily been in a learning environment, and so we need to allow times, just like we would at the beginning of the year, for setting instructional routines, building community, getting to know one another. We also really need to make sure we're thinking about the social emotional learning needs for our students and how that factors in. I don't think that any of us are thinking either in preschool or other grades that we're going to jump in and like be on that next page for literacy or math. We want to make sure that we're really giving an opportunity to think about the social emotional needs of everybody in this situation. We're also really thinking about how does asynchronous learning connect or not connect to the synchronous learning time? What's going to be the best way for our students to continue practicing their learning without being an overstretch on our teachers? So we'll continue to be developing our plans and our supports for that learning time. What we also know is that we all need time for staff to transition, and we'll be able to identify that as a system for supporting teachers to get into their classrooms, to set up and organize and be prepared for kids. We also know that, as I mentioned earlier, we are ordering materials and resources and developing new tools for us to use to support the instruction, and that TLL staff in the district office will be here to support that work as well. And we are continuing to work on specific guidance to support both teacher preparation and our student learning. Kim, anything else that you would want to add to any of this information prior to moving on to next steps?
No, I think that's good. There's some good questions coming in, but I'm trying to specifically answer them by person so people can go back and look at the answers. Like you said, we don't really have all of the answers, but this is just, we can't keep waiting to have a draft plan. So we're going to start from here and make adjustments as needed.
And your questions and thoughts and concerns will help us as we think about, oh, that's right. Let's think about that other component of this, which is why we're trying to come to this early in the work. So our next steps, January 14th, later this week, we have our hybrid return family webinar. It will be taking place at 8 in the morning and then 5 o'clock in the evening. Then we will have our family commitment window. Catherine Carboni Rogers sent out a communication today that explained that families will respond to a survey as to whether or not they'll be coming back to Highline for in-person. So at this time, again, you're welcome to continue to put your questions and thoughts in the chat, but you're also able to access our exit ticket, which I will put in the chat for everybody to click on. And we'd love for you to take time to put your thoughts and thinking into this chat, into this exit ticket for us, please. So a lot of questions about snack. I think that's a great one for us to continue to think about and what that would look like. We definitely won't have lunch, but I have not heard that we would not have snack.
We're still looking into that. The problem with providing meals and snacks is that we're going to continue to provide the week-long meal boxes for families, and that we're not, as part of that grant, we're not allowed to ask a family name when they collect those. So we also can't have families double dipping. So because that is our nutritional meal plan right now, they'll be receiving their meals the same way, and we can't additionally offer meals. We are still looking at how we can provide closed snacks through some kind of funding source to send home with kids, but they won't be eating at school at this point.
I see a question specific about Montessori pre-K. From my understanding right now, we have 10 students enrolled in the Montessori program. And so Debbie Ellis and I are working closely to identify what that would look like in terms of bringing students back, if we needed to be in a AB cohort with that, or if we would just move forward with 10 students. So we'll definitely be working on that together.
Question about kids with IEPs. We won't do priority for IEP kids over peers. The plan is to take roughly 50% of kids who want to come back and split them into those 4 groups that we talked about. So 2 a.m. across the week and 2 p.m. across the week. So there should be plenty of space for all families that want to return, but that would be the same as ECAP and Montessori and Ready K. But the other piece of that is that we're just really waiting for the results from the staff survey before we break up into cohorts. And then to answer Marla's question about synergy, those kids, as best we can, kids who are AM in your class now would stay AM, but they wouldn't be your cohort. The way the slide is, it's cohort A and B as far as AM, PM, but it won't be the cohort A and B as far as Monday versus Thursday. Does that make sense? So really, the way I see it in pre-K, there's going to be 4 cohorts. There'll be 2 morning cohorts and 2 afternoon cohorts. Does that make more sense?
So are you splitting up your AM classroom? Like your AM caseload and your PM caseload?
Yes. So Elba, if I looked at your class, your AM class, all of the kids that want to come back, half of them would come Monday, Tuesday, and half of them would come Thursday, Friday. And the same with your afternoon. So you're looking at, if you have 12, if you're full in the morning and you have 12 students, then you would have 6 AM or Monday, Tuesday, and 6 Thursday, Friday.
So they would
go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, in order to create like the social distancing that was brought up and making sure we have enough furniture, really we're looking at 2 to 3 tables per preschool classroom in order to create that social distancing and making sure that kids have room to move around without.
Right. So to clarify, that means that you're like, let's say all your students in your AM want to go, they are not necessarily going to be going in the AM.
They should be going in the AM. We should keep their schedule the same as far as I'm understanding, unless something random happens.
Gotcha.
The thought is that if you're a morning kid, you're going to be put in either a Monday, Tuesday AM or a Tuesday, Thursday PM for your in-person learning.
Gotcha.
It's different than the elementary model.
Okay. I have one more question about staffing. So are we, so let's say one of our staff members is opting to do accommodations and wants to do remote teaching. So how are we still going to have kids come to school even though we're not covered? Are we guaranteed to be covered by staff? Does that make sense?
That's where we're going to have to get creative and wait for staff surveys to come back. And it may be that someone from my building who doesn't have as many kids coming back is going to help support your kids. Or, I mean, there's going to have to be some teaming and some work around how we support teachers who are in person, for sure.
Right. Okay.
That answer your question?
It does. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It will also be dependent on the number of students that we have opting to come back as well, and how many students choose to stay virtual. So teachers who are unable to come back for whatever reason could be then teaching a virtual classroom.
Which I think, Brenda, gets to your point that if you have students who are not wanting to come back, there will be some kind of virtual option plus the asynchronous option. So that's still, you know, all of it is so hard to wait, but all of that is really dependent on surveys. We really need families to be filling out the surveys starting the 14th. And then we really need to make sure staff are committing either way so we can make plans.
See some questions about concerns of students being able to socially distance during pre-K at the ages of 3 and 4. And yes, that's definitely on all of our minds, right? There's nothing developmentally appropriate about staying away from other kids. And having a 5-year-old myself who is transitioning into kindergarten, possibly March 1st, this is something I worry about myself. He's a very social boy and loves to give hugs and interact with friends in a pretty typical way. And so what does school look like? I think that's where we're going to need to really think about how do we really engage kids in a space where they still feel like they're interacting and having fun together and learning together, but not hands-on. So how do we develop the right plans to do that? And that's where we're going to all have to put on our best creative thinking hats and our care and love for kids to make that a fun place for them. But definitely top of mind.
So,
Kristen Gaynor, you had a question. Can you articulate that? Marla, I'll get right back to you.
okay.
Sorry.
No, that's fine.
It just says that this is our potential instructional model. And so I'm just wondering, is this the plan that we're going with, or could it change?
I think this is our best thinking, but we're also taking feedback still, right? We don't want to build this and then throw it out. So we're trying to build it in and get input as we go. This is the best thinking as of right now. And if there's no huge glitches and no staffing concerns or family concerns, then this would be the model, but we are really leery to roll out this as this is our plan without getting input.
Okay, so you're trying to get teacher input now so we can see, is this good? And then we can get parent input. I just think, you know, I'm both a parent and a teacher.
Yep.
And it's really hard to make decisions when you don't know all of the details. And that's something I'm kind of struggling with right now, is that I don't know all the details for what, you know, preschool is going to look like, what's extended going to look like. And that also impacts what decisions I make as a parent for my child. Mm-hmm. Do I send my child to school or not? It's all dependent on all of these pieces fitting together. And so I think if we're going to ask parents, you know, are you going to send your kid back? We need to tell them what the model is, because they're not going to be able to make a decision unless they know.
Which will happen on Thursday.
Okay, awesome.
And that's why we just did a precursor survey before we knew the model. We have a rough model now that we think is going to be good, and we'll get final results we'll share that with parents on the 14th and you guys tonight. And then the second survey will come out to ask parents to commit, and they have 2 weeks to do it. So hopefully that helps. There's nothing easy about this.
The other question I had, and I kind of wanted to ask during the whole group one, was, can parents like decide to do fully remote and then decide, oh, well, now I want to send my child to school? Or is it kind of whatever decision you make, that's permanent?
I have not heard in Highline how that will happen once parents make a decision. I think that we want to have as accurate numbers as possible so that staffing allocations and these types of decisions really are working with the best set of data for who's coming back for students, which is why we're trying to be really clear in what we think we know right now, so parents can make that best decision so we have less change of heart later. But I also know that it's very difficult for us to say to a parent, make a decision and don't change your mind.
So that's exactly what I was going to say. We really want to honor the families and the students. We also are trying to protect you of not having that ebb and flow as a staff member and knowing who you have and who you don't have. But my guess is, because we're a public school, we're not going to turn people away. I think we really want people to commit, but there's always going to be room. Marley, you had a question.
Yeah, just Kristen, what I asked that same question with my admin, and they weren't sure what the district will mandate. However, like what Kim was talking about, being public schools and we don't tend to turn people away, it sounds like it'll be very much kind of an individual process. If there's room in my AM class and a family now wants to come back, say in April or May, I think it sounds like it'll be somewhat flexible. So my question was, if hypothetically my paras don't come back, and knowing how difficult it is to get substitutes and stuff, will that be falling upon the individual buildings to figure that out? If I'm down, 2 paras, am I going to my building administrators as a, school-based pre-K? Am I going to SPED with that for them to find me paraeducators? At what point does lack of staffing mean that we can't be in person with the kids?
Marla, obviously that's above my pay grade, but I would love for you to get that in the chat so we can capture it. My hunch is that it will go to Gay, but she can only do what she can go do too. I mean, we all know the reality of staffing in a normal year, but please put that in the chat so we capture that and we can get a better answer, because I don't have an answer for that.
And or your exit ticket.
Right. Exit ticket would work, Marla. I'm actually worried about that too, obviously, because we're already short-staffed. Yeah.
I had a question about newly qualified students, and if we are at sort of quote unquote capacity for in-person learning. So is it just like if we're going to be at overload, they just send them to where they're not, and then where they're not overloaded or don't have enough students, and then they just come to us in the fall? I mean, how's that going to work?
The perfect world, we're not going to be serving any less kids in person than we are in a normal year, because we're taking your caseload and splitting it in 4s, basically. So typically you guys are split, your caseloads are AM, PM, right? So now we're going to take those AM, PM and cut them in half. So we're not really taking slots away in a perfect world. Like, granted, there's staffing issues and all of those other things.
Right.
But again, we're really hoping that that's not going to be an issue widespread. My guess is we're going to serve them, like Marla said, if there's a family who comes back, we're not going to turn them away because your caseload is full. We may ask them to have a different teacher or attend a different session. So yes, that would be my guess, that they would go to wherever there's a spot available and we would move them in the fall. Okay. Like I said, the way we designed this, there's nobody taking less in their caseload than they normally would.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
I know that we were not able to answer all the questions in the chat this evening. However, we will definitely continue to capture all of these questions. And again, please complete the exit ticket with any other questions, comments, thoughts. All of this, all of your thinking really will go into our planning, and we'll be reaching out to staff to help us think through some of these components too. So, stay in communication with us as we continue to make this the best it can be. I'm happy to stay on. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I can stay on too. I was just going to say too that the family survey that will come out again on the 14th should be shared by principals. If you need to reach out to me, you're welcome to do that. But we're asking that I'm not asking you to help your families fill it out, but make it readily available. Get it out in email, get it out in Seesaw. We'll be doing the same thing, building wide or district wide. But the more families we hear from, the better off we're going to be to make a good solid plan. Like she said, we really want to have our plans solidified on February 1. So we're ready to go and have worked out kinks before we come back.
If my parents ask me, if they say, if we choose to not return, does that mean we will for sure get a different teacher? This is, if I return to teach and a family of mine decides not to, is it true for me to say your child will have a different teacher in distance? That's true. So that's decided. Or they
would have to access just async instruction.
And
I think there's individual conversations you could have, but the idea is they return, or you're the async teacher, but they're not going to have you like remotely. We're not going to ask you to be doing both. That's my understanding at this point. We're not going to ask you to serve your cohorts and then also be serving kids on Zoom that didn't want to come back.
Right.
I I totally, yes, yes, absolutely. And I totally appreciate that. I did talk to some ILCs about how they could combine their class meeting to have your kids at home and the kids in the building together. And it's been very problematic. So it needs to be separate.
And some of that was teacher driven. They didn't want to give their kids to a different teacher, but they have learned that that's really hard. And we heard that loud and clear.
Well, they also have 10 children rather than like 24. So that's a little different. But I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't giving misinformation if a family asks me. And then I guess you kind of said maybe they could choose async only, but I'm wondering if they can, if they're
I don't know that for sure.
Yeah, a child with an IEP. I don't know that could.
Yeah.
So if parents are asking us questions, we can, like, what are we allowed to say? Or like, kind of going off of what Marla was saying. So I looped with my kiddos. I'm here representing HEA in this exact like room right now. But how does that work if parents are like, well, we want you? We just straight up say like, sorry, you may have a new teacher no matter what you choose. Is that what we're just telling families?
I think it's safe to say that there's always a possibility that there's a new teacher, but it really will depend on the number of staff that come back, the number of kids that opt to come back. There's so many factors.
Or warn parents that they could have a different teacher.
I think it's safe to say that there's a possibility, yes.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say we're looking at lots of different models and we're trying to honor all people. But if you're a staff member who's going to come back and teach in person, you likely will not be the remote teacher for them if they choose the opposite, or vice versa.
Okay.
And if you're a fully remote person, that's even what we're looking at. I don't know how many people have said that for their survey, but if you're going to be a remote person, then you will likely have additional or different students.
Yes, and a fully remote option, this last chat. Well, I believe the fully remote would be an option, and it would be
It'd be Seesaw and Zoom.
yes. I have lost all my faces. I can't see any of you.
I don't either.
And I can't minimize my screen while I'm recording. So there we go. Okay, well, I can't see you. I can still see the chat. I am happy to stick around for a few more minutes if people want to continue asking questions, but I want to thank you for your participation tonight and just recognize that it is 5 o'clock and it's time for you to go be a human without a screen for a little bit if you can. You're welcome.
I wondered if the district has, or if there's any guidelines as far as, mixing of different groups of students. For example, like LRC would maybe pull a group and have other students, and then they would go back to their classroom. And so then you have this mixing of students, because it could impact my program if they're coming, to extended day and they're grouped with students that are from another classroom. So we have, several classrooms feeding into one program. Is there any regulations around not having students mixing with other groups of students?
Yes, I'm pulling up what Gay is sharing around LRC right now. So give me just a second, because that's obviously going on or was going on during our group. And I think we are going to have to look at your group similar to like SLPs and OTs. I I think that it's going to need to still continue to be, it looks like it needs to be in distance learning, so there isn't those cross grouping happening. That makes sense. I was all over the place while I pulled up that document. But LRC is going to, from my understanding, going to stay in distance learning. So the student would come, say they come in the morning, they're going to have their LRC support in the afternoon from home. So that's probably very likely going to be what's happening with SLPs, OTs, and extended day teachers.
Okay, thank you.